It's time!
The largest mixed martial arts promotion on the planet, the UFC, founded by Art Davie and Rory Gracie in 1993, was put together to determine the most effective fighting style. Fighters would come from all over to see if they could be the greatest. Unlike boxing where fighters could only use their hands, UFC is an MMA promotion, meaning anything is allowed. If you wanted to throw a head kick, it was only a decision away. However, during some of the UFC's earliest events, certain techniques and strategies were used that proved too brutal for the public opinion, like eye gouging and biting, which led to the organization getting some major modifications from Mr. Dana White himself when he stepped into the picture in 2001, most notably weight classes. Taking a look at some pride fights really puts this into perspective. UFC has grown tremendously over the last couple of decades, with social media really coming in clutch for them, getting to showcase rising stars and characters that make you intrigued about the fight. Back in the 2010s, the first person to realize that drama sells was a man that couldn't be beaten, and a grandfather to us all, Chael Sonnen. Being a natural spokesman on the mic, used it to grab attention from untouched audiences. Over time, more of the fighters came to this conclusion as well, and started saying the most out-of-pocket things because they know it sells. The thing that separates UFC from other professional sports is the diversity it has. Soccer primarily is in one place, football primarily in one place, same with basketball, baseball, you get the idea. With the UFC, there are fighters from everywhere. In recent times, they've been spawning out of the mountains, coming for everyone's souls. When the question who is the greatest UFC fighter comes up, it's hard to answer because there have been so many dominant champions that makes it difficult to pick just one, unless you're Dana. What is the criteria? Is it the most wins, the most title defenses, the most KOs? There's lots to choose from, and the same goes for influence. Which fighter has had the greatest impact on the world? The Chuck Liddells, the Ronda Rouseys, Brock Lesnar coming in from the WWE world? There's so many. But most people would agree that one fighter had the greatest regime to being world champion, destroying everyone in his path, picking rounds to KO his opponent, but most importantly the trash talk to back it up. To no surprise, it's Conor McGregor. Although his life is kinda going downhill recently, he had the world on his shoulders back in 2015, getting everybody to watch all his fights, including his famous 13-second KO of former champ Jose Aldo. His time in his prime was something that had never happened in the MMA world, making lifelong fans of the sport all over the world. UFC gets massive exposure from these athletes. That's one of the many reasons why it rose to being the most successful organization in the niche. But UFC was not always a glowing icon of the MMA world. Back in 2001, when the idea of MMA being a legitimate sport was in question, it was not doing well with huge amounts of debt weighing on the name. Fighters not being paid fair sums, still arguable to this day. Not being able to book venues because nobody wanted to host a gladiatorial match. And just all the in-between-the-lines goop that goes into such an undertaking. But within all this headache, there was a light. When Dana White took a look at the UFC and realized the potential it had, he went to his good childhood friends the Fertitta brothers to get a $2 million check to revive the company. Dana saw what the UFC could become. He envisioned an ethical sport by introducing standardized rules such as weight classes and time limits. These simple additions made it safer and easier to understand, making it more appealing to mainstream audiences. Dana wasn't just looking at the sport itself, but everything around it as well. He wanted it to blow the earth's socks off. And to do something like that, you needed the best people to do it, or person. Mr. Joe Rogan. Joe had always been fascinated with MMA, and participated in tournaments back in his earlier years. So it's no surprise that he was a backstage interviewer in 1997. However, due to travel costs, he had to put down the mic, as they were becoming higher than his paycheck. Dana had seen Joe on TV doing a podcast, and instantly knew that he needed him. Seeing him speak so passionately about MMA, and his knowledge was exactly what the UFC needed. So White called him up and he asked if he wanted to commentate the fights. Rogan accepted almost immediately. UFC at this point was still pretty shaky, so Joe was not paid to commentate, But according to him, this was fine because he was just thinking he gets the best seats for free, which is funny. Rogan proved to be a vital part of the growth of the company and is still commentating to this day. Lots of people get into the UFC because of Joe, seeing as he has one of the biggest podcasts in the world over the past many years. And we know what happens when Joe gets talking. He doesn't stop, so he'll just be in the middle of a podcast and just starts going into depth about this technique or crazy video or something for long enough for you to be like, yeah, this is cool. The UFC is the fight business, meaning it's not always the nicest. Sometimes the employees get into it with the boss. And over the many years since Dana took over, he's had some massive disagreements with UFC fighters. Ex-business partners, Ariel Helwani. Man, he hates Ariel. I don't though. And sometimes because of these kerfuffles, fighters don't show up. Seriously, Tito called Dana the night of the fight and told him he wasn't going to fight if he didn't get more money, even though the contracts had been signed. That's some pretty built up rage to do that. Or maybe it's just Tito things. Even though Tito hated Dana, Dana hated Tito with a passion. He said his favorite fight of all time was Tito vs. Chuck, when Chuck KO'd Tito with a crazy combo. And when the fight finished, he called up Chuck and told him he wanted his shorts and his gloves so he could frame them in his house. And they are still there to this day. There might have been and still may be some bad blood between Dana and somebody, but you can't deny that White gets the job done. Without him, no one would know what the UFC is today, because it would not exist. UFC has had some rocky beginnings, and like they say, life is a roller coaster. It goes up and down, and it came out on top, leading to new fans around the world, a legitimate path for fighters, superstars, and memories. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy and want more videos like this one, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Until next time.